Greetings and welcome to This is Revolution. My name is Jean Badgelan, in for Jason Miles today, and we have another interesting show for you with good friend of TIR, Douglas Lain. But before we begin, speaking with Douglas about free speech, why everybody hates him, why he's been banned from Twitter, all those important issues that I'm sure you're all dying to find the answer out to, I would like to remind everybody to like and subscribe, hit the bell, do all the things that help TIR grow as a show. And as I always say, no white people are paid in the production of This is Revolution. So don't feel bad that I'm getting any money for anything that we're doing. That being said, if you do have a little bit of extra money, please consider supporting TIR on Patreon. It does help keep Jason in food. He is a growing boy and he needs to have his full steak meals. And he can't do that if he has to not eat food because he doesn't have money. So consider supporting us on TIR. Now, what is the topic for today? Well, it is free speech. And who better to talk about free speech with than publisher and renegade leftist, apparently, Douglas Lain. Hey, Doug, welcome to TIR. Welcome back to the safe space.
I don't think it's fair to say that everybody hates me. Just
no, that's true.
95% of people on the left maybe at this moment. And I don't even think they really hate me. I think that's an overstatement as well. I think they find me annoying.
Maybe annoying, maybe concerned about your mental health as well. That's another common another common refrain. But I want to jump right in. We've got an hour. Doug's time is valuable, as they say in Turkey. Fuck it, nuck it. Time is money. So, Doug, you've been on this Twitter Files thing. We've discussed the Twitter Files before with you and Vaughn. And recently you've had a couple of articles, which I've put in the description below so people can take a look at them. You have one in Compact magazine, so welcome to the Fascist Club. You have one in Sublation, and you have a letter to Cosmonaut magazine where you have been discussing the issue of free speech, and you've been issuing what I would call a Cutrone-esque critique.
Cutrone-esque.
Cutrone-esque. But you've been issuing this critique of the left regarding the question of free speech and the whole issue that we're dealing with now, which is, discussions about disinformation, about how to combat disinformation, the relationship between large social media platforms and the government, the constitutional implications for those, for the government's relationship with social media companies. Obviously, it's if the government steps in and stops a publisher publishing something, it's very clearly a violation of the First Amendment, the protection of speech. In the case of these social media companies, it's kind of a legal terror incognito. It's like
not anymore. No. It is not. It's not terror incognito at all anymore. And really, if you read the Twitter Files, it wasn't difficult to muster an opinion there either. I mean, the injunction from Louisiana makes it clear that what the government was doing was censoring legally protected speech, and that was a violation of the First Amendment, which is why the judge, forbid the Biden administration from continuing. So no, it's not difficult. It's no different than telling a publisher what to publish or stopping a newspaper from running a story or in any other way violating the First Amendment. This is a very clear-cut case and very large, expansive attack on the First Amendment.
Well, can you outline what this case was about and why it's significant and why you regard it as the vindication of this argument, which has been brewing for a while?
Well, I can tell you in broad strokes that plaintiffs sued a variety of government organizations, including the Biden administration itself, for violating their free speech rights and by censoring them on social media, not just on Twitter, but on YouTube and Google broadly and Facebook and other companies. They gathered a lot of documents to support their claims. The judge looked it over and saw, yes, indeed, the state was threatening the social media companies with retaliation if they didn't submit to their demands for censorship on the platforms. So and then the judge demanded that they stop. They were compelled to stop. This is being appealed. I don't know what the next ruling will be, but so it's very likely I think that this will go the same way that the uh, attempts to protect the Fourth Amendment went in 2013. So when the big tech companies were found to be in conjunction with the state violating people's Fourth Amendment rights and doing illegal search and seizure, um, there were some court cases early on which went for the plaintiffs, people who had their rights violated, but then on appeal, for a variety of reasons, including national security reasons, the case was dismissed. That was rescinded, and the surveillance was allowed to ultimately continue. I think we're probably going to be looking at something like that now, but in this moment, it has been made clear that a fair reading of the Constitution and the legal precedents and the evidence of state interference would show that the Biden administration, on a massive scale, and not just the Biden administration, but the Department of Homeland Security, the CDC, the FBI, the CIA, and on, many parts of the government bureaucracy uh, worked to suppress people's legally protected speech online in violation of the First Amendment.
So, what is your criticism then that you've outlined this in the various articles that you wrote, the compact piece, the sublation piece, and the cosmonaut piece, and the cosmonaut piece was part of an exchange as well. What what is your criticism of the left, broadly speaking, with regards to its disposition towards this question of the constitutional right to free speech and these big tech monopolies that control these platforms?
Well, in the compact piece, which is the first piece that got published, I started out by mentioning the conclusions of the Durham report, which was a special prosecutor investigated the investigation into Trump around the allegations of collusion with Putin and Russia, and found really two major things. I mean, there's a bunch of details in the Durham report, but the major thing was that the FBI did not follow its own protocols or standards when opening up I think it was called Crossfire Hurricane, which was the investigation
Mm-hmm.
into Trump. That the initial basis for that investigation, if properly investigated, would have meant that there would have been no investigation, because the evidence was so thin, and there was a lot of counterfactuals that would have indicated there was no collusion at the beginning. And the other thing that was discovered was that the reports that the FBI received that the Clinton campaign was putting together basically a false flag or some sort of attempt to cajole the FBI into attacking Trump along these lines, that they had concocted evidence and were planning to try to weaponize the FBI against the Trump campaign. That those reports that the FBI were aware of were ignored, and in fact, the evidence presented by the Clinton campaign, like the Steele dossier, was taken up
Mm-hmm.
as further evidence. And then there's all sorts of shenanigans that went on to perpetuate the investigation when there was no evidence of collusion. And I started with that not because I'm sympathetic to the Trump campaign, but because the allegation of Russian collusion with the then sitting president and allegations of massive Russian interference in our election was what justified the Department of Homeland Security uh, taking control over our entire electoral infrastructure, including all of the major media. companies and social, including digital media. So in 2017, in response to what turned out to be a hoax, the Department of Homeland Security started this project to control the internet, control the major media. And so when you take those two things together, you can see that the real victim of the hoax, the Russiagate hoax, wasn't the Trump campaign or the Trump administration, but the American public and our own political freedom. So as a leftist, that's a fact that we should be able to take up and do something with and understand. It should inform our politics. And that's one of the things that I said in this piece in the in Compact.
Yeah, that it was a pretext for this. I mean, and whether it was a hoax or not, I'm assuming you regard that as being a kind of second order issue anyway, because the problem is, even if there was, for example, large scale evidence of some kind of intervention into the American electoral process, as you're pointing out, you're saying, well, the victims is not the Trump campaign, it's everybody else, because it leads to a kind of more like restrictive or state-controlled field for free speech. So it was
right. But I mean, if you compare it to the attacks of 9/11, right? At the time, there were some people who said, "Oh, well, that was allowed to happen," or somehow that was a hoax or a false flag or something. And at that time, I said, "Well, to me, it doesn't matter whether or not it was a hoax or not. It's still the policies that followed were unjustified, specifically like the Patriot Act and the two military adventures that the United States went on were not justified responses to those terrorist attacks. If you were to find out though that 9/11 in fact was a hoax, I think you shouldn't deny it. It does change the character of the reaction. I mean, you might say to yourself, well, there was a terrorist attack. This was an attack. This was an overreaction. The ideological position of the people who implemented it are different from mine. We need to change the character of our politics. We need to respond, so that we can put the right people in power and so forth. And that may still be what we want to do, but I think it's worth noting when it's done on purpose. I mean, I think it is worth noting that it was a planned hoax, this Russiagate story. I'm not saying that Russiagate is comparable to 9/11, and I'm certainly not saying 9/11 was a hoax, but I'm just saying it does change the character of what followed, because it shows a desire, especially in the context of the war on terror and the kind of inertia that the entire bureaucratic mechanism around the war on terror took hold of as it tried to perpetuate itself. The need to justify the continuation and expansion of that form of control needs to be pointed to. That we should recognize that a state of exception was created on false premises, and that it had a massive impact on limiting our civil liberties.
And there is something, there, in the way that the language of the Russiagate issue was used, was very vague in a certain sense when people talked about Russian interference in the American electoral process. I mean, people have, P-tape, blackmail, compromat, all these kind of things in their mind. But, when we talk about interference, it's a very broad thing. I mean, yes, like Russian, users on Facebook and on these things were, quote unquote, intervening in the US election by posting things. But it's my understanding that one's constitutional rights to free speech, it's not tied to citizenship per se. And
that's right.
And there is a big difference between a country and its media apparatus or whatever posting a bunch of stuff on Facebook for whatever reason, and you know, the far more serious issue of like if they were like bribing people or they had like compromising information on the president. So in a certain way, there was an ambiguity in the language that could give them a kind of, like they could move the
The
scandal,
goalposts.
move the goalposts of the scandal. Because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there is evidence that there was Russian troll farms and things doing
Sure,
that.
yeah, there were Russian troll farms. From what I understand, the Russian troll farms were mostly seeking to make money from clicks and weren't particularly aimed in one direction or another politically. But I don't have all the facts in front of me. But even if they were largely, let's say, Russian troll farms that were supporting Trump, there's no evidence that had any significant impact on the election, and it would not be beyond the norm. But the point is that wasn't the story given in order to justify the Russiagate investigation or the Crossfire Hurricane. It wasn't the reason given for the Department of Homeland Security extending its jurisdiction. It wasn't the reason given for the beginning of the war on disinformation. What was pushed was the idea that the man sitting in the Oval Office was a Russian agent. I mean,
yeah, it was a Manchurian candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this Russia. When you're talking about misinformation, obviously the Russiagate thing is one aspect of it, but another aspect, of course, has been the question of COVID disinformation as well, which is something that you've been addressing, which is, I mean, from my perspective, again, I am not comfortable with the state becoming more enmeshed with big tech, which it already is it's already, heavily enmeshed with, but like an even deeper involvement on the grounds of combating misinformation. But I do feel like there's perhaps it's more understandable to be concerned about medical misinformation out there that people were concerned about during this crisis.
Well, yeah, I mean, the problem with censorship as a way to combat misinformation about medicine is that science doesn't work through political power and political consensus. It works through, open criticism and debate.
Mm-hmm.
If you just go by what has the authority, of a consensus, that means it has the power to impose itself. You're going to usually, I mean, the history has shown you're going to have a lot of setbacks and problems that way. Like just getting surgeons to wash their hands before they open up patients was difficult because of the consensus that it wasn't necessary. Whereas if there had been a climate of open debate and argumentation, it probably would have happened a lot faster. That's my understanding. And when it comes to COVID, a lot of the things that we were told, had the science behind it, that was the consensus of the most expert scientists, turned out not to be true. Just one of them is the masking mandates weren't justified according to the most recent study that I've seen. Another one, I mean, not that masks never have any function,
the government flip-flopped on it. The government flip-flopped on it because during the early phases of the pandemic, when there was a shortage, the government evidently didn't trust people with the masks and didn't recommend people wear these masks. And it was only later that they changed their opinion. And it seems to have been a complete distrust of the public to, not buy up all the masks because of like a deeper structural issue where like America wasn't producing enough masks. So they just lied to the public for their own good.
Well, so they said, but throughout the pandemic, you could see that what was called scientific consensus was only a political consensus, of use to the establishment. And we were being asked to accept that the scientific consensus could change dramatically and even being asked to accept that it could change based on the needs of the state rather than based on any kind of argument or evidence or anything like that. So, like Fauci told us directly, yeah, I lied to you before, but it was for your own good. And so that's sort of what we're being asked to accept overall, like there to accept that we don't have the right to the truth, that the state should just impose its will upon the public, um, for their own good, they say. But there's lots of reasons to be skeptical that the state has the public's best interest in mind. That does not, I think most of the left would not have a problem accepting that. So what the reason I wrote this compact piece was because I felt as though there was something going on the left where obvious, clear facts were being ignored or couldn't be taken up or being misunderstood. Um, and I wanted to point out that that was happening and point to what I thought the reason why was, which was I think that the reason why people don't want to accept the Durham report as having any political import for the left is because it is difficult for the Democrats. It hurts their
Mm.
electoral chances. The reason that they don't want to accept that the origin of COVID was covered up is because it hurts um, Anthony Fauci, who was thought of as kind of a liberal icon and a warrior against Trump at a certain point, and is also associated with the Democratic Party now. It's sort of a hero for the Democrats. We have a very strong commitment to the Democratic Party on the left, and it spans the whole gamut. I mean, from the World Socialist website to the New York Times. What you're dealing with is a left that thinks its primary obligation is to protect the Democratic Party from the reactionary right.
Can I then ask you? Uh, you say like there's a whole gamut of opinion that regards itself as needing to protect the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
How are you fitting? Like your MSNBC liberal and the World Socialist. What is it? The World Socialist something. The world's. How are you fitting?
It's just the WSWS, the World
There's
Socialist website.
yeah
I
the
forget the name of the actual trot group that's behind it. The International Committee of the Fourth International is the trot group that's behind the World Socialist website. Well, I mean, you could look at their reaction to this recent Louisiana decision by the judge to stop the Biden administration from censoring people. And they had the same reaction as CNN
Mhm.
or MSNBC, which was that this was a conservative Trump-appointed judge trying to help spread misinformation about COVID. That was the spin that they put on it, rather than, oh yeah, we remember what the First Amendment is, and we understand the need for free speech, and if we're going to struggle for social change or have any kind of politics based on the public or the working class having some agency. But no, the headline for the World Socialist website was right-wing judge bars federal agencies from restricting COVID-19 misinformation on social media. I mean, this in the context of a moment where, I mean, they also consider evidence that the virus originated in the lab to be in support of Steve Bannon. Like they claimed that Steve Bannon invented the lab leak hypothesis, which is insane. I mean, I'm sure he did support that theory, but he did not invent it. It actually came from within the CDC. Some of the first people to put that forward worked with Fauci. But
But
anyhow, yeah, that would be how I would see it. Is that would be an example.
but to play, to put the other argument forward, but isn't this disinformation that is spread? And I've seen crazy stuff about, like, all kinds of nonsense about COVID, that it doesn't exist, or that like you have people going out there like deliberately acting in ways that are like just not normal, to be like, to prove to themselves, to prove to people that, oh, don't be scared, and then they end up getting sick and things like that. I mean,
Yeah.
people are still dying from COVID. I mean, like, people are acting like the crisis is over, but there are still people who are suffering from COVID.
What are the numbers on that? Is it beyond the level of, let's say, the flu? I mean, I know that's kind of a conservative talking point from early on in the pandemic, but how bad is it now?
I mean, I haven't seen any statistics. I mean, I know, or it's anecdotal. Like, my dad is still suffering from long COVID, and
Long
it's
COVID, yeah.
yeah, and there are problems with this. And yes, let's just take it as a given that the government kind of botched its response. But what is the
I'm, of
alternative?
course, not saying that COVID wasn't a severe disease and that it didn't need to have some kind of response put forward, and I'm not saying like, oh, that was a hoax, like the Russiagate. No, COVID existed, and it was a real, it may have leaked from a lab, it may have come from nature. The jury is still out on that. The most of the evidence that is out there that points to a lab leak at the moment, but that's not 100% known. But the yeah, so on COVID misinformation, the one of the kind of background assumptions is that it's better to have the wrong information be able to get propagated than to have the state control what is made it publicly available. I mean, I've been told things from QAnon people such as, no, the vaccine is the virus, or Bill Soros is trying to depopulate. Is it William? Is it Bill Soros? Anyway, George Soros, Bill Gates, and George Soros. I combine them into Bill Soros, but that's who it is. The love child of Bill Gates and George Soros are trying to depopulate the earth. I was told Biden's going to start a nuclear war so that Trump can't get reelected. Just insane things. But the thing is, I didn't believe those things when I heard them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think most people would believe those things. But when you are caught out censoring information from Nobel Prize winning scientists, along with from RFK, who's kind of not a Nobel Prize winning scientist, or the guy I'm thinking of may or may not have won the Nobel Prize, but a top-notch scientist, an epidemiologist. When you censor expert opinion alongside kooky opinion in order to push one narrative, that I think breeds paranoia and makes the government look far less reputable than it would have been. So if you're actually concerned about people's health, not censoring people to push a narrative is not the right way to go. Trying to be transparent, being as honest as you can, providing the information as thoroughly as you can. Those are the things that I think would probably work for more people than this effort at suppressing information. Especially given that your remedies, given that the remedies that were offered early days in the pandemic weren't necessarily the right ones. That the debate was needed to develop a better response to COVID. So.
And I mean, 2 points. I mean, the first one would be, of course, like, and perhaps we're getting off the free speech issue, but I think
we're still talking about free speech, really, aren't we?
But it's related. It's like with something like a disease, especially, there is, a requirement. It's not something that a society as a whole has to deal with, right? So, if 80% of people can be on board with doing the appropriate measures for something, but if 20% decide, screw it, we're going to do what we want, then that's not going to be able to, you're not going to be able to combat the problem.
Well, you're kind of assuming that there was a remedy on offer that would actually stop, or that required everyone to participate in order for it to work. Like, for instance, everyone should have gotten vaccinated. But in fact, it appears that because the vaccines didn't entirely stop transmission, that instead what happened was that when you have a vaccinated population with which that sporadically vaccinated rolled out, what you're going to create is mutations. That's what I remember hearing anyway early on, and that seemed to be what happened. So even with the earliest vaccines, which were the most effective, the consequence of them was never going to be herd immunity. It was always going to be the speed up of mutation, and which in a way is a lucky thing because Omicron came along, which was far less deadly and far more transmittable, and so it wiped out the other variants um, and got us a lot closer to something like herd immunity much more quickly. But the point is that none of that had anything to do with vaccine mandates. A vaccine mandate was not required to get us to safety. It was never going to get us to safety. So, so the idea that you had to have, 100% conformity and impose that in an authoritarian way is undone by the facts. I mean, and I'm saying that as someone who thinks people should have gotten vaccinated, and that it, certainly helped to reduce sickness, and especially in people over the age of, like, let's say 40. But the vaccine mandates were never justified.
So, so do you see this then as? Like, even if, like, we take all this,
and I just want to point out that I'm not, maybe down the line someone will come up with a study and say, look, Doug was wrong. There was a moment where if we gotten 100% vaccination when the very first strain was out there, we could have gotten to herd immunity. And in which case, I'll be glad to admit I was wrong. But I this is my best guess, and I think we're in a better position if I get to express that than if I don't. So anyway, go ahead.
So so what you're saying is that the suppression of free speech ends up making the issue worse. Not necessarily because the advice being given or the recommendations being given are bad. They may or may not be bad, but rather because it creates a distrust in the system, especially when
combination. It's both that it creates distrust and that you're more likely to be wrong if you base your so-called scientific consensus on political authority rather than science. Because when you close down debate, you are closing down science. You are replacing political authority and power for science.
But where was this coming from? Was this coming from, this was coming from the medical community, by and large, the overall consensus within the medical community. Yes.
It was coming from the Department of Homeland Security cutout called the Virality Project, which was running out of Stanford, which had the aim of protecting Dr. Fauci's reputation alongside of the aim of stopping true stories about vaccine side effects and what they deemed at the time to be misinformation or disinformation about the origin of the virus. It was not some community of experts who were debating amongst themselves and given in a transparent way to arrive at a consensus over time. One of the problems is that with science, you don't ever really arrive at a completely fixed consensus.
Yeah, of course. And I fully, I fully understand that, government. Look at something like Lysenkoism in the Soviet Union.
Yeah, it's exactly the example that I posted on Facebook the other day.
Exactly. Yeah, it's quite dangerous when particular theories become
state dogma. They say, no, you can't use any other way to grow crops than the best Soviet way, and crops didn't grow and people starved. Yeah.
But in terms of the reaction and the suppression of views that were not in line with what people were talking about. Do you think that what's the alternative to how would a Doug Lain like to see a response to this? Do you see this was like a nefarious conspiracy, that this was just an excuse to grab power, or do you see this as being a kind of uh, just the impulse of the state? It's not like people had the kind of conspiracy to, like, we're going to use this crisis to like do something else, but rather they're reacting in real time to try and deal with a really serious problem when they don't have full command of the facts, and they can only kind of give like their best judgment, and
Well,
they
you got to remember that the censorship apparatus wasn't set up primarily at first around COVID.
Right. That's an important.
Yeah, it was set up before the 2020 election to stop election misinformation. To combat Trump, and that was done not because, and this wasn't done because they were concerned about Trump after January 6th. January 6th was in the future. This was done to combat Russian Trump election misinformation and disinformation, interference from Trump and Russia as a colluding force in American elections. That's why the disinformation campaign was put together, which goes to, again, to why the Durham report is so important, because in fact, there was no collusion between Trump and Putin to fix America's elections. And so that justification was a false one. Why did they use a fake collusion story to justify the expansion of their power? Well, because they hated Trump. I mean, that's one reason. Because after 2008 and the economic crisis, there had been a series of kind of political movements to try to challenge their authority that had ended up in this populist moment, and they wanted to put it down. Because overall our system is constantly in crisis, and so you're just constantly going to get these states of exception and the need for more and more draconian laws. I mean, that's been the case when the state is brought in to manage the contradictions within capitalism for us. This is how it behaves. This is what it does. This is how the state manages things, is by back and forth movement of more and less authoritarian means. When the public is winning, when the struggle for freedom is winning, you push them back, you restrain the state, you get a pretty strong First Amendment. You get some constraints on the cops. You get due process and things like that. When the public is losing, when there is no political force representing especially the working class, you get this stuff where the state just prods right over you. And that's what's happening now. And what's really bad now is that the so-called socialist left is completely on board with it for the most part. And as you said to me earlier today in a chat, and everyone thinks I'm a crank for saying this stuff, which, I'm comfortable with. There's a lot worse words I could, that could be hurled in my direction than crank. But anyway.
So do you see this? You see this as kind of the left is tailing the Democratic Party, whether it intends to or not, because it's so terrified of the Republican Party. And I would add, there are like legitimate reasons to be scared of the Republican Party, especially if you're in one of those vulnerable groups who are in the gun sights of the Republican Party. I mean, I know, I don't pretend to have any answers to like what political strategy should be. I understand, like, I regard the Democratic Party as being a dead end for socialism, but I also understand why people gravitate.
I think it's worth noting that the Republican Party has been making a lot of headway with working class people over the last two election cycles, and even really going back to the 70s, and that even the non-white working classes has been drifting more towards the Republican Party. So I'm not saying that means Republican Party it represents the working class
I mean,
interest.
yeah, I mean, and
I'm
also,
just saying
all,
that it's not uniformly the case that if you are a minority or in some non-white group that you are think of the Republican Party as more of your enemy than the Democrats. That's less and less the case. What I do think is that if you are in a red state and you're an intellectual or you're working within the university or you care about free speech as a primary issue, or if you are wanting to protect certain civil rights around sexuality or trans issues, then yeah, the Republican Party is absolutely your enemy. And I can see that why you'd want to oppose them. I want to oppose them on those same issues, but it isn't really the case that there's this lesser evil idea. I think we should put that to rest. There's one evil, and it's the capitalist state, and it has two factions. We should actually be glad it has two instead of just one, because sometimes they fight each other and things get slowed down, and you can kind of use one against the other. Like the Bush administration faced some criticism from the Democrats, and today the Biden administration is facing some criticism from the Republicans.
but also the Republicans are clamping down on free speech at the state level as well. I mean, we're seeing this with DeSantis in Florida. So there it's you know it is a it's not like, I think people, and I'm not saying you, Doug, I'm saying I think some people get sick of the Democrats and then begin to tail the Republicans and think that, well, they may suck, but at least they're in favor of free speech. Well,
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I oppose book banning. I don't
yeah.
think teenage kids need to be told not to read the dirty parts or dirty novels. What fun would life be if you couldn't sneak off to the school library and read, the erotic bits from a novel or whatever?
I
And I think
mean, I'd be happy.
these
I'd
people
be
need
happy
to
if they
just
snuck off and
cool
read
off.
it. I'd be happy if they snuck off and read anything, to be honest.
Right, yeah.
So
they are probably reading something on their phones. But when I was a teenager, I remember going to my junior high library and finding a novel about hippies in the 70s and like learning a lot about what to do in the back of the bus. And that
nice.
was, I think, a nice thing. I wouldn't want to rob any other future teenager from that secret thrill of finding the dirty bits in the school library.
Well, yeah, fair enough. That's fair enough. But I do want to clarify that, because while I'm certainly think it's concerning that the state is so hand in glove with big tech, and it's not just the issue of censorship; it's also they're hugely involved in the military-industrial complex, in providing government service, in providing basic infrastructure. And even if the state wasn't intervening directly, these companies have themselves as like enterprises that monopolize a platform that didn't exist 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that the state censorship is worse than the kind of stuff that's what I wrote in for Sublation magazine.
Yeah,
Was
that's why I wanted to get onto
it. Yeah, because like right now, it's not just the U.S. state, but also the Ukrainian state that is censoring American speech. There's been new reports made public around the FBI passing on requests to social media from the Ukrainian Secret Service or whatever their
I mean,
secret police are, and to tell them, oh, this post over here, take that down. I think this one here is violating your terms of service, and that's from the Ukrainian state. So, and I don't think that in a country where there's some competition between the media companies and there's kind of more ideological diversity that it could be nearly as uniform. Like I think I just remember the war on terror. Like the New York Times published major stories about Abu Ghraib, from Seymour Hersh, and that went around the world. That was not suppressed by the Bush administration. Today, the same journalist reporting on the bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline is labeled disinformation. And if you try to share it on Facebook or other social media sites, you are quietly throttled. You are algorithmically suppressed. Anyone who does that gets suppressed now. Um, so, I mean, that's a very big difference. And it's the difference. One of the differences is between state censorship and just the kind of manufactured consent that you used to get back in the day.
Now, let's turn to that Cosmonaut article then. So,
Okay.
in the Cosmonaut article, it's a little bit more theoretically orientated,
Mm-hmm.
and you're making a case for civil society over the state. That's how I read it. Can you
Mm-hmm.
explain what you mean by that exactly, and
Yeah.
why you didn't like the Althusserian response?
Well, okay. I actually wrote a letter back to the Althusserian who wrote to me, and it has yet to be published. I don't know if they're going to run it or not, but they said that they would, but I haven't heard when they're going to. But so the reason I support the civil society over the state is because civil society is a realm where production takes place. It's where the workers are. It's also where the capitalists are. It's the realm of free competition between the capitalists, but it's also the realm where there's a labor market, and we have the kind of freedom to decide where we want to work. It's a side of everyday life. It's where we are supposed to be able to be ourselves. It's riddled with contradictions. It's mediated by capitalism. Um, but capitalism is founded on the power of the working class. It's the labor power of the working class that sets up the conditions of capitalism, and it's only the self transcendence of the working class taking political power to change its own conditions that will get us beyond these contradictions. The state comes in to try to rule over civil society to smooth out all the problems that the primary mode of production causes. Is how I think of it, and does so through violence. That's the primary weapon of the state is bodies of armed men, guns, tanks, jets, cluster munitions, but also laws and jails and police and so you want to work with the state on the level of laws and bureaucracies more than through cluster bombs, certainly, if you can do that. But most of all, what you want to do is liberate and emancipate the working class in civil society so that they can organize politically to change civil society.
Hmm. Okay, I want to open it up to the chat a little bit. Do people have any questions that they want to pose to Doug about his position? I will give people time to respond to it. But while I'm waiting for some questions to come up, the response was that civil society is just is hand in glove with the state anyway, and this is a kind of Althusian notion that civil society is where this reproduction takes place. Can you?
I'm sorry, I got distracted by people saying I'm not a sophisticated thinker in the chat. I'm sort of noticing that I'm not getting a lot of love
Are you
in the
not getting a
chat.
lot of love?
It's all right. I don't expect it. I'd like to know what I'm leaving out, but so you're asking me what do I make of the Althusserian notion that the state actually is primary and that there kind of is no such thing as civil society. It's just all ideological state apparatuses and so forth.
Yes.
I just think that's overlooks the transformation through the 19th century and before, like from the old aristocracy into bourgeois democracies. It overlooks the power that labor had to change its own conditions. It's acting as though, I mean, if you read Althusser, he talks about the churches, a lot. He seems to think that these centralized mechanisms of control still completely dominate. But in fact, what's crazy about capitalism is that it's precisely the way in which freedom was expressed and created by bourgeois revolutionaries and the working class that created the conditions of contradiction that then made state power necessary. So I just reject the Althusserian idea that there's some sort of transhistorical force or power that isn't mediated by capital. I reject his anti-Hegelianism and his kind of quiet rejection of Marx's theory of value. If I'm remembering correctly, he's pretty critical of that. And the way in which Althusser takes up what later kind of becomes a postmodern position, where as if there is no way to know anything. It's all just power relations. It's all just imposition. Like there's no difference between science and political consensus and power, and there is. So that's why I reject Althusser.
We have a question from Epps.
I want to answer because the name Jordan is can be a man's name. Jordan, you asked why did I think you were a man, and I just assumed that Jordan was a man's name and would talk to you as if I would any man. And then really, you told me you were a woman, and so
there you go.
But that's why.
So, does Doug think that there is more repression of information in 2023 than in 2003? If so, what examples does he have? Because the New York Times reporting on Abu Ghraib at least 13 months after the fact isn't evidence.
Well, let's take a look at that. So when did Seymour Hersh? I mean, I had forgotten that it took that long.
It was quite it was quite a bit afterwards. I'm pretty sure.
The New Yorker was where it got published originally in April 30th of 2004, right? By Seymour Hersh. So, and Seymour Hersh reported on the Nord Stream pipeline a little while ago. So, and it was not published in the New York Times. No, I'm sorry, the New Yorker, and it didn't become a international story, but was suppressed. So I'm not sure. I mean, what the 13 months is between what and what? Between when he published his story and when
the abuse took place, and I think that's.
But when the abuse took place, well, how long did it take him to report on the Nord Stream pipeline getting blown up? Putting that together.
That didn't take that long, and we all know it was the Orcas anyway. So, like, that's.
Well, I don't see. Has Seymour Hersh said that he was suppressed? I mean, eventually the New Yorker published the piece, and it became an international scandal that the Bush administration had to deal with. So I mean, that's the difference. And now, if you try to publish that online, you get not only does the story not get spread, but whoever does it gets suppressed algorithmically, apparently forever. So, I mean, I think that's different. I'm not saying that everything was hunky-dory back when the war on terror was going on. Obviously not. The Patriot Act had been put into place. There was a massive amount of collusion between the mainstream media and the Bush administration. We were led into a war that was absolutely unnecessary. But the left knew that, at least. I mean, the left didn't go, oh, yeah, the people who are criticizing the Bush administration are, deplorable, and we should oppose them and embrace the state. They knew that we were being lied into war, and were able to protest it. Some of the biggest protests against that ever happened in world history happened in response to the build-up to the war in Iraq. So there's the difference.
We have another question, slightly off topic, but it should be a fun one. Doug, how do you square your interest in Society of the Spectacle with your orthodox Marxism?
I'm critical of Guy Debord's some of Guy Debord's writings. I'm not. I don't. I'm not arrogant enough to say that I have an orthodox Marxist position anyway. I just try to hew as closely to Marx as I can. But yeah, I don't think Guy Debord's the councilism is necessarily the right path. I think that the way he deploys the term the spectacle In the original book in 1967, it's probably a little overblown, but I found reading comments on Society of the Spectacle today and thinking of the spectacle as a part of the state rather than something kind of free floating or being produced culturally, but rather a political form of government, the spectacular form of government. I found that it was actually quite useful, especially when I started reading him about disinformation and what he had to say about disinformation back in 1988.
Well, let's have a last question here. This is more on topic. What laws and threats has the state used to force media platforms to suppress? Without such, it doesn't just it does just fall into Chomsky's manufacturing consent. So, what threats, laws or threats has the state used to force social media platforms to suppress?
They made direct threats against social media platforms to basically put them out of business if they didn't comply with requests to censor material online.
Like, for example, though, like with the Hunter Biden nude pics.
No, it was like, if you do not go along with our demands that you censor disinformation online, we'll take away Article 230. We'll take away your right to be protected from litigation. That would pretty much sink the whole company. That was one example. It wasn't like one at a time, threat. It was like a long-term campaign of threatening the social media companies with deregulation if they didn't comply with their efforts to censor. And that started in 2017.
Do you see that as being, though, an inevitability to a certain degree? Like, this was inevitably going to happen because the state is going to regulate these things.
Because atoms hit other atoms, and there's no such thing as free will, and everything just happens in a determined way. Or what makes it inevitable?
Yeah, what makes it what I'm saying is that the state is going to regulate these bodies, right? And
well, I mean, according to the First Amendment, the state cannot regulate legally protected speech. That would be a violation of our civil rights and civil liberties. We cannot, that is not inevitable. That, in fact, is basically our duty as citizens to oppose any effort by the state to regulate speech.
But isn't it within the state's rights? And I'm playing devil's advocate. Isn't it within the state's right to say, like, look, if you're going to have all this stuff on your platform, we're going to remove the protection against litigation? Don't newspapers have to vet things, for example? Like, you can sue a newspaper if they defame you. Isn't that the case?
Okay, so it would be within the state's right to say, we no longer think that you should be protected from litigation, and to legislate against that. It is not within the state's right to use the threat of that legislation to impose censorship on the platform. You see the difference? Like, yeah, they, of course, if there's a political will to change the character of the internet and no longer offer legal protection to big monopoly companies like Facebook in order to create more competition online, then, the tough shit for Facebook. But if you create an apparatus to censor people's speech online and use the threat of breaking up these monopolies to accomplish it, that's a violation of the people's free speech.
So it's not the act per se of changing the regulatory structure.
Yeah.
You're saying because they use this specifically as a threat.
Yeah, they said either clean up your act and start censoring disinformation, or we'll break up your monopoly power. And they said that directly. That's not, I'm barely reading into it at all. They said that again and again and again. Adam Schiff said it particularly, but Elizabeth Warren said it. It was said over and over again. And then there are emails to that effect as well, I believe. So yeah, there's your threat.
Do you think, though, the state should break up these monopolies, all things being equal?
I don't know. I think that I at the moment, I don't know, maybe. I mean, if they actually did it, right? How easy? I as long as they don't pass the Restrict Act, it'd
Mm-hmm.
probably be better for free speech if they did break up the monopolies, because they would have a lot harder time trying to regulate and control 100 different Facebooks rather than just one. But it's complicated because monopoly power under capitalism is how you get a mass power. So you wouldn't have a mass communication online for people. You wouldn't have the
Yeah.
ability for any American to possibly have his voice heard without that monopoly power and protection. So I don't really know. I think the best possible answer is a transparently run social media platform that's that's publicly run, with the First Amendment being fully enforced.
So you would,
And
so as a, let's say, a reform, let's say as a reform, not the end goal of everything, you would prefer a legal regime where perhaps, you have a Facebook and a Twitter nationalized and then subject to free speech, and these run as a public commons, as a
yeah,
public
that'd
good.
be great. Sure. That sounds really good to me. But the problem is that, I mean, we don't have any political force that wants to do that. And we might put that forward as leftists, as a suggestion, but unless we're able to also say, as it stands now, the state is in violation of everyone's First Amendment rights, the danger in really emphasizing that is to kind of shift the target around and say, oh, well, the real problem is the real problem is corporate power and not the state. The state is intervening and censoring us, and that they're not our friend. They're not. They are doing that in order to stop us, the left, from organizing politically. That's their aim, and so we should recognize that, and we should be able to recognize that. The fact that it is so difficult to recognize spells out. I mean, points to some pretty profound failures on our part in the last 2 decades, at least. So.
So the conclusion is Doug wants nationalized Facebook, and he wants
Sure, if you want to make that the conclusion, you can.
and he wants the Biden administration to take over Twitter and give him his Twitter account back.
Oh, well, yeah, I do want that. Or RFK, if RFK. So if anyone knows RFK, would you let him know I didn't mean it when I said that we should shoot him? I was just making a little joke at someone else's expense. It was sarcastic. Yeah, it was, I meant the opposite of what I was saying. That was what made it sarcastic. Yeah, or Elon, if you're listening, I'm a free speech guy, man. Let me back on Twitter. I miss it.
I don't think Elon's a free speech guy at the end of the day. He's been taking tweets down for Erdogan in Turkey. So
yeah, I know. And he's doing it for the EU too, starting very soon. So I do want you all to read dirty novels in school. I think that's a good idea.
But I'm really glad that you came to your true position, which was the same as Sam Cedars, which is nationalize the. All
right. You're a dirty, rotten trickster.
I'm Trixie. I'm a Trixie.
There you go. Listen, I gotta go, but it was good talking to you.
Good talking to you, Doug. It's been a pleasure as usual, and we hope to see you back here in the future. And chat was very pleased to see you. All the positive Doug Lain comments out there, and everybody at TIR is rooting for you getting your Twitter account back, because at the end of the day, who else is going to put his foot in it on Twitter? It's just not as
so many people. Jason Miles. That's, by the way, your name on the screen right now. Yeah, no, I think there's plenty of people out there. But Elon Musk asking Zuckerberg if he wants to have a dick measuring contest, I think he goes beyond the kind of shit I pulled on Twitter. But anyway, thanks for having me on.
See you later, Doug.
Bye.
Bye. Well, that was the exciting Doug Lain here on TIR. So I hope you all appreciated that. Talking about Free speech. If Doug is for it, Sam must be against it. Oh no, there we go. So we've got some good comments here. So someone in the chat asked me earlier about some thoughts about what's going on with NATO and Turkey. So if I'm happy to answer that question or any other questions that people might have for me regarding that. So as some of you may know, for the last, for the last while, since the beginning of the Ukraine war, there has been, of course, the discussions over expanding NATO, particularly in Scandinavia. We've had Finland and, of course, Sweden applying for membership of NATO. Now, some people think this is a response to the Americans twisting their arm to do this, but I think there is actually, whether you agree with it or not, there is a significant portion of domestic opinion in these countries that sees Russia as a threat, and so they want to join NATO, or at least their political elites and a significant portion of their populations want to join NATO. Now, in the case of Sweden, Sweden has been blocked by Turkey. Turkey is a member of NATO, and Turkey has a number of outstanding issues with Sweden. There's a large Kurdish community in Sweden, many of whom are sympathetic to the Kurdistan Workers' Party. There are also individuals who the Turkish government has been accusing of being connected to the Fethullah Gülen movement, this religious movement that was once allied with Erdogan, but was deemed, or at least involved, in the attempted coup against him in 2016. So Turkey has been demanding the extradition of individuals it sees as terrorists, and there has been some resistance to this. I mean, some of these people who they're calling to be deported have been involved in criminal activities. Others have been, just exercising their free speech rights. And of course, Turkey wants to censor certain opposition groups, and it's very cynical in a sense, because Turkey's official discourse always goes that, well, we're not against Kurdish people, we're against the PKK, but because the PKK advocates for Kurdish autonomy and self-rule, anyone who advocates for Kurdish autonomy or self-rule could be deemed as spreading terrorist propaganda, because, of course, this is something that the PKK advocates. So Turkey has been playing this hardball, and this was in many ways primarily for the domestic audience. Anti-imperialism, a kind of anti-imperialist discourse, works very well amongst the nationalist sections of the Turkish public. And in the lead up to the election, there was this attempt by the Erdogan administration to seize the nationalist high ground, so causing complications for the United States, and blocking Sweden's entry was, seen as Turkey resisting Western imperialism. But a lot of Turkish anti-imperialism is mainly, not entirely, mainly at the level of discourse. And the reason for this is structural, because Turkey's military, but not only its military, its economy is heavily tied to the Western bloc. As much as the Eurasianists in Turkey want to see a closer relationship with between Turkey and Russia and Turkey and China, China is not going to provide an equivalent amount of money to Turkey. And Turkey has outstanding issues with Russia. There are areas where they cooperate, but there are areas where they have conflict, particularly in places like Syria and in Libya as well. So we have, Erdogan before the election seeming to be taking this tilt to the east towards Asia. And, there were some BRICS advocates and multipolar people who were celebrating this abroad and also within Turkey. This idea that Turkey is a great power and it's standing up against the West. But Erdogan is truly probably one of the greatest Bonapartist leaders of the modern era, because he's really able to navigate these domestic and foreign policy issues very well. He is able to, he played this nationalist card before the election. Now the election is behind him. He is resolving issues with the West. Now, part of these issues were problems that he made for himself by purchasing the Russian air defense system, which got him kicked out of the F-35 program. But they want parts for their F-16s, and now it looks like they're going to get F-16s, and they're going to be able to force Sweden to clamp down on some Kurdish activism, to change some of their laws. We'll see how it plays out with the deportations. And, basically you have, Erdogan coming back into the fold and, making noises about allowing Ukraine to join NATO, which of course is quite funny, because of course NATO isn't going to join NATO anytime soon, but it's a good way for him to get in the headlines. And that's what it comes down to. Erdogan has made himself an important figure. He's got himself in the headlines, and he's made sure that the great powers upon which Turkey relies on, it relies on trade with Europe. Europe pays off Turkey to keep Syrian refugees in Turkey. He's been able to play his hand. I wouldn't say he's played in a longer term, over a longer historical period, since 2016. I wouldn't say he's played his hand perfectly. I think, he's overplayed it at certain points, especially with the F-35s. I think he was trying to extract concessions in Syria, which he didn't get. But in the shorter term, he's played a pretty good hand to get himself sort of back at the table, back playing on board. And this is what it comes down to. Turkey is, and always has been, a significant regional power, and an important part of the Western Bloc. And it's precisely because Turkey is secure within this Western Bloc that they're able to play a kind of hard diplomatic game with the United States to extract concessions from them, and to extract concessions from Sweden. And, fair play to the master of politics. He's got at least what he's wanted at the moment. And Putin's looking weak. So, yeah, it doesn't make sense to play too much of the middle game with the United States and Russia, when, I see a lot of people going on about how strong Russia is. I think that's a lot of wishful thinking. Erdogan released prisoners. I mean, in the light of the Wagner uprising, whatever people think that is the result of, certainly it was a humiliation on the international scene for Putin, because, it doesn't look good when one of the key institutions of your military apparatus decides to do a march for justice. And I think post-elections made sense for Turkey to slide to the West. And when it comes to Turkish opinion, there is hostility towards the West, but there is also skepticism towards Russia and China. Russia is a historical enemy of Turkey throughout the 18th and 19th century. There were a long history of conflicts between the Ottoman Empire and Turkey. There was a brief period of good relations during the Bolshevik Revolution, when Turkey was fighting Greece and Armenia. There was an alliance with the Bolsheviks, but by the 1930s, Turkey was moving more back into the Western fold and wanting acceptance within the Western system. And, at the end of the Cold War, Stalin actually demanded territorial concessions from Turkey, which helped push Turkey into the Western camp even further. So there is suspicion towards all the great powers in Turkey, and this changes depending on the particular moment in history you're at. There's also suspicion towards China. Initially, when the story regarding the Uyghurs in China first came out, there was there was a certain amount of sympathy for the Uyghurs. There was criticism in Turkey, both from the government and also from the right-wing pan-Turkish elements of Turkish politics, because the Uyghurs are a Turkic people, and the pan-Turkists want to see a kind of Turkic union, that stretches from China to Turkey, with Turkey being the center of it. And this, Turkish official sympathy for the Uyghurs, was shut down very quickly because China made a deal with Erdogan. There was some money involved, but there are still nationalist elements in Turkey who are uncomfortable with any great power, whether it's China, Russia, or the United States, interfering within the internal affairs of the country. So Erdogan, he rides a nationalist wave. It's like the Shai Hulud in Dune. You can make it move in a particular direction, but it is a very dangerous beast to ride, because if you fall off, the nationalists can crush you. They can turn against you. In 2015, when Erdogan lost his majority, a big reason, people emphasized the success of the Kurdish political parties, which is part of the reason, but another reason he lost his majority was because the extreme right took votes away from him as well. So we have like a complicated state of affairs, and I have no idea what the alarm is. Maybe this building is burning down and I'm just sitting here with my earphones on, just ignoring it. But if I don't survive this firestorm, which I don't think is happening, I will see you all in the future. But yes, so Turkey finally came down. Erdogan is a realist in many ways. I mean, even if you look at his military adventures overseas, and I think this is one thing that we need to think about when we talk about imperialism. There's a lot of people who will go like, actually, Turkey and Russia, they can't be imperialist because of X, Y, and Z. And it depends how you're using the term imperialism. If you want to use the term imperialism in, let's say, the Leninist, Bukharinist way, then perhaps no, they aren't imperialist in that traditional way, which I would argue is actually not entirely true. But another way imperialism can be understood as it can be the way in which foreign policy and war can be used in order to consolidate the power of the executive internally. So, for example, if you read Marx's discussions on the Indian revolt, the Indian Revolution of the 1850s, the rebellion that took place amongst the sepoys, Marx is not super sympathetic to the rebels in India, but rather what he talks about is the way that the liberal government of Palmerston uses this external crisis in empire to consolidate itself as at home. The same thing is, you can argue the same thing is true of Turkey, where military adventures into Syria and into Azerbaijan are as much about consolidating power at home as they are about, extracting resources. The Turkish government is looking for markets. It is looking for resources. It is looking for, all these economic things. But, the timing and the specificities of these things are designed to split the opposition. The Syria and Azerbaijan operations, which Turkey was, well, in the Syria case was involved directly, and in the Azerbaijan case was involved indirectly. These operations made it extremely difficult for an opposition to coalesce against him, because it split the radical left, which was opposed to external military adventures, from the kind of Kemalist, right, I would call them the secular right, which, although opposed to Erdogan, holds many of the same nationalist preconceptions and feelings that Erdogan's political party does. The difference between the secular nationalists and the Erdogan's nationalists is largely related to, culture war issues internally, but when it comes to foreign policy, they're both pretty much on the same page. And we saw this in the run-up to the second round of the Turkish presidential election, where in order to try and, win over people to his side, the opposition candidate, Kılıçdaroğlu, basically started running to the nationalist right and adopting, extremely harsh language, which ironically allowed Erdogan to portray himself as a moderating force. So he really is truly one of the most adaptable politicians in the modern era. He's played the liberal during his early phase. And then once his power was threatened, he was able to consolidate a new political bloc behind him, a historic bloc, to use the Gramscian terms, which brought in a nationalist element that had hitherto been in opposition to him and hitherto been attacked by him. So he's continuing to play this balancing act, both domestically in terms of balancing domestic political forces, setting different groups against one another, and coasting on that internally, and at the same time playing a good role at balancing out the structural requirements that Turkey and the Turkish capitalist class need in terms of their connections to the United States. I mean, it's not like people think it's just a matter of flipping a switch. It's not. Like, the entire Turkish economy has been orientated towards Europe and the West, and to the Middle East as well. But, that's where the money is. In terms of its military is by and large dependent on Western technology. So you can't just overnight flip that. But you can flirt with other powers in order to try and get a better deal. Now, sometimes he miscalculates, I think, as in the case of the F-35. It's not all like I wouldn't call him a political genius per se, as someone in the chat said, but I would say he has a political cunning, right? It's not like this is all thought out 5 years in advance, or this is all going to a plan, but he's very good at reacting to a situation and bouncing back from a mistake and making himself kind of indispensable to the international system. And this is the game that he plays, and he can play it precisely because he is in the Western bloc. And it's not unusual for anti-Americanism to be flaunted in the Western bloc. France during the Cold War was forever giving the United States grief. That didn't change France's fundamental position as a keystone of the Western political bloc. So let's have a look. There's a question. Jean, let's have a go. What's this question? Jean, the opposition's move to join with the nationalist right against Erdogan, it didn't work, but it is understandable as a position to take. Also, did Kurd attack influence that decision? No, it's not an irrational position for them to take. I mean, the fundamental problem in Turkey is Turkish nationalism is deeply hostile to Kurds and expressions of Kurdish identity. This obviously includes formal expressions of Kurdish identity, like politics, but also historically, even cultural expressions of that. Now, Erdogan changed that from the traditional Turkish state approach to open up a space for extremely conservative Kurds to join his coalition. And in fact, one of the stories of the last election in Turkey was that the political wing of Hezbollah, which was a Kurdish political party insurgency group that basically fought the Kurdistan Workers' Party, an Islamic fundamentalist group that fought the Kurdistan Workers' Party in the 1990s. Their political wing was drawn into the Erdogan coalition. So, the approach is not like Erdogan's going to try and exterminate all the Kurds in Turkey overnight, but rather it's to bring in the pliable ones, the religious conservative ones, under his umbrella, promote those, and decapitate any other potential Kurdish opposition. I mean, Turkey could have sidelined the Kurdistan Workers' Party in the 2000s and 2010s significantly by working directly with the pro-Kurdish political parties, but they didn't do that. And there is a utility in having a political party that enjoys about 10% of the vote, having them not only in opposition to the government, but also in opposition to other elements of the opposition. It keeps that opposition split on nationalist grounds, just as the way that, racial politics in the United States is often used to split, or has historically been used to split black and white workers from each other. We see the same dynamics playing out in Turkey, where you have this polarization. And this is a big difference between Erdogan and someone like Putin, which I think was really exposed in the Wagner issue. The Wagner revolt kind of just like fizzled out. It was kind of a joke, but it's interesting enough that there was no real mass mobilization to defend Putin. Russia has relied on a kind of depoliticized mass of the population. Putin came to power through bureaucratic maneuvering, and you still have this kind of oligarchical political system surrounding him. Whereas Erdogan came up through a democratic process. Erdogan is a democratic leader in many ways. And his politics is not being based on depoliticization per se, but hyper politicization by constantly polarizing Turkish societies. And now what we're seeing post-election is, they're going after LGBTQ people. For years you could have it's not like gay rights in Turkey was great, but now there's a real assault on those kind of things, precisely in order to fracture people, to polarize people. And, for this system, what you end up with a big proportion of the country who hates Erdogan, but a big proportion of the country who is do or die for Erdogan and who sees the opposition as an existential threat to him. So this polarization is extremely resilient, or at least looks far more resilient than, for example, a regime like Putin's regime, which, when I look, when people want to talk about the causes of the Ukraine war, I think one thing that we might want to think about more is how Putin's military adventure into Ukraine was in part probably motivated by a crisis within the Russian state. I get 1904 Russo-Japanese vibes from this war, especially when we saw the Russians kind of just try and cruise into Kiev and just go in there and just topple the government. I think there was a big miscalculation on how this was going to work out, and I think it was a play. I think a big proportion of making this play, and we'll probably find out in the years to come, was an attempt to reinvigorate the legitimacy of the Russian state. Now, of course, you can talk about NATO expansion, or NATO expansion, that's a shorthand for what we actually mean, which is the gradual integration of, former socialist and former Soviet states into the economic and political apparatus of the Western system. People talk about NATO, but it's also, I think there's a deeper issue that, for perfectly understandable reasons, a lot of countries in the post-Soviet era were scared about Russia. And that's not just like anti-communism per se, but there's a long, throughout the 19th century, Russia was the boogeyman of Eastern Europe. Russia was the suppressor of the 1848 revolutions in Eastern Europe. It was the, you know, it was a power that was a major force in Eastern Europe, and I think a lot of newly independent countries, saw Russia as their primary security threat, and thus aligned or shifted towards the West. It is what it is, as it were. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I think you're reading it wrong, Jean. Oh, what am I reading wrong? Okay, am I reading something wrong? Oh. Those are just my thoughts. Again, I'm not going to say 1848 revolutions, not 1948, 1848. So Russia, I think there was a contradiction in the post-Maidan Russian policy towards Ukraine, because the response obviously was the occupation of the Crimea, and then the occupation of or the intervention into the Donbass region. And that creates a kind of contradiction for the Russians, because Ukraine had been quite finely balanced, shifting between pro-Russian and pro-European elements. But by, disconnecting Crimea and the Donbass region, well, that shifted the political balance of power in Ukraine more decisively towards the West. So you ended up with a Ukrainian electoral system, which a Ukraine in which the balance of power that had existed previously in the country between pro-Russian and pro-European forces, and in which we saw there was alternations between these different groups, well, that just swung it decisively towards the West, and it was kind of an inevitable outcome, if you ask me, of taking that choice, which made a kind of national security logic, but also had implications which the which the Russians obviously weren't happy with. So that would be my take on that. But it is what it is, as it were. Any other points people want? It does Russia stop if it wins Ukraine or move to the Balkan states? I mean, is it going to move to the Baltic states? I mean, that seems like not a great idea for Russia. I mean, A, you'll trigger NATO, and that seems pretty dangerous. And B, they're already having a hard time in Ukraine. I mean, the Ukrainians aren't winning, but the Russians aren't winning. And at the end of the day, if you're trying to, it's the Russians that need the big win because they need to put this war to an end. The Ukrainians, people, a lot of Ukrainians, I'm pretty sure, will just be, your average like nationalists. They're not necessarily Nazi, but now it's been highly polarized, and so they're going to resist. So you have a kind of stalemate, which probably Russia has the resources to overcome, but Ukraine is sustaining at least the defensive posture, and Russia's greatest successes have been when they've sort of maintained that defensive posture. So their attack, like, I just see this thing dragging on, and I don't really see, maybe one side will collapse. I think, if one side is going to collapse, it probably be the Ukrainians. And if Russia is to collapse, I think that I would guess that would be probably the result of something internal to Russia. So that's and at the end of the day, I don't think Putin really wants a nuclear war. I don't think anybody really wants a nuclear war. It doesn't seem like a great idea from any potential conflict. Why does Jean think I'm dating a goth burlesque dancer? I don't know, Strom. I think you may be dating a goth burlesque dancer. I just imagine you dating that. That's what I would like to think. Ukraine is slowly being whittled down demographically. Yeah, it's going to be whittled down. It's like it's just a pretty sad war for nothing. I don't think Ukraine or the United States were like going to invade Russia. Like, I just don't believe that was like a serious thing that was going to happen, to be honest. I mean, I know people say that that's something just like, are they going to invade Russia? Like, probably not. And it's just been immensely destabilizing for the international system. And anything that takes us to closer to war is not great. And like, a lot of people on the left are just, I think, in denial because they want an easy good guy, bad guy narrative about like who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. Well, if you think anti-imperialism is the greatest threat to humanity, American imperialism is the greatest threat to humanity, then Russia is the good guy, I suppose. If you think national self-determination and is the most important issue, then you think Ukraine's the good guy. To me, this just looks like just a horrific bloodbath, and I just don't see how anything to do with this war is going to have good consequences for anybody anywhere. Let's say Russia collapses as a result of the war. Is that a positive thing that's going to happen? What does it mean for a country with tons of nuclear weapons suddenly collapsing? What's that going to have? What's that? It's not just Americans, by the way, JB, who want a good guy, bad guy narrative. A lot of people want a good guy, bad guy narrative. And this is just a proxy, with the American left specifically. I think this is just a proxy for their own powerlessness, because it's like a side to root for. And, we can root for this side or we can root for that side. And I'm like, I'm just rooting for this to end in the most humane way possible. And I'm not going to like say how it should end, because I don't know how it should end. I don't know what a just ending looks like for a conflict like this. But I would like a situation where people aren't getting cluster bombed or, killed, or like, war is horrible, right? I don't know how many people in the chat have seen the aftermath of war or seen war, but I've seen war and I've seen the aftermath of war. And it's just not very pretty. And violence is reactionary. Violence pushes people towards reaction. So, I'm not interested in litigating who's to blame or who's the good guy or who's the bad guy. It's just a profoundly sad situation, and I just would like it to end, as I would like most wars to end. And maybe that makes me a fence sitter or a coward. I've been called both things, both by liberals and so-called comrades. But yeah, I just don't see where this is going. But it's a bloody war, and it's going to have long-term implications. And what I'm concerned about, specifically about these long-term implications, is how this might serve as a kind of Iraq or Syrian civil war for Europeans, and how we might see, even when the war ends, right-wing forces, both the pro-Russian right-wing forces and the pro-Ukrainian right-wing forces, becoming, more important politically. And, then maybe we will see like a genuine fascism, rather than this kind of fear of fascism we see at the moment, which is largely, it's like, look, guys, a bunch of dudes in their parents' basements typing like Nazi stuff on Twitter is not going to be a fascist movement. But, thousands of veterans coming into Europe, who knows? So yeah, that would be my take on things. But again, I'm not a Russia expert. Don't talk to me, don't expect me to know too much about Russia beyond, this. But that is what it is, But I think there's any good way out for this war. And I think when Chomsky calls Jean means well, what does that mean? Well, maybe I do mean well. Yeah, so I don't want to really like come down on any side in this conflict beyond just saying, let's end the war, and really we don't have any influence over whether we can end the war. So, there's no pleasure in this, because I think one of the things I really dislike about the discourse about this is people are freaking clapping, right? Clapping for their side. And like, what are we clapping for, right? What do you think Russia is doing in this country, and what do you think any of this is going to do? So, that's it. That's my take on this. That's my take. Okay, people. So, any other questions or comments you want to ask me before I bugger off home to play Suzerain, which is a pretty cool game? What do you think of Doug's COVID take, Shane? I thought they were nonsense from the actual leftist critique of medicine. I mean, I am very uncomfortable talking about what's the right take on COVID, largely because, I think I don't have the information on what is medically the correct response. I do feel like we were lied to. I feel kind of really annoyed that they lied to people about, saying masks didn't work when there was a mask shortage, and then said that this was. I think that was really counterproductive and really dangerous thing to do. And I think COVID is freaking serious. There's like people going around acting like it's no bullshit, but I had COVID. Everybody in my family had COVID, and my dad's still feeling unwell from COVID. It's not a freaking joke, right? And yeah, it's like, well, what about flu? It's like, well, flu is flu. We know about flu. This was kind of something novel, the novel coronavirus. And, people, like, I'm not qualified to know what the best response is. And I don't, I haven't done the research to be able to come up with, a good take on anything. And frankly, I think there's a lot of freaking people out there who need to like shut up about things that they don't know that much about, especially things which involve, like very specific technical information. And yeah, so if you asking me what's the best way to manage something, I don't know. What would the right response look like? I don't know. When it comes to like lying to the public, I can definitely say I disagree with that. I think, transparency. I think Doug is correct that like you need to have transparency. And I think, honestly, I think turning to the state to suppress misinformation or like bad opinions, I'm actually I understand why people want to do it, and I'm sympathetic to it in some ways, but I just don't think it's the best approach to doing it. And I think we, as responsible citizens, it's our duty to combat what we see as misinformation, because maybe the state will combat something I see as misinformation and I think should be suppressed, but I just don't trust that it'll always be that case. And I think people, I'm just very, very uncomfortable with. Put it this way: I'm not like I don't really have like a positive politics because I don't know what the answer to anything is. But I would say this: there are things that I'm willing to make the devil's bargain with the capitalist state. Like I would like them to do like. If there was some Democrat who was really going to bring healthcare for all, Medicare for all, I might not believe believe they're going to solve issues, but I might vote for him if I could vote in America, because I'm like, I'd be totally down with having healthcare for all. I think that would be fantastic. When it comes to suppressing misinformation, even things which I think are really bad, I don't want to make that devil's bargain. I would make devil's bargains for certain things with the capitalist state. I wouldn't with others. And when it comes to policing speech, very uncomfortable with that. And I think we have to have trust in people. Yeah, the New Deal was the devil's bargain. Exactly. Um, so I just feel very uncomfortable with people talking very like you won't hear us on TIR talking, uh, you know, about a lot of these medical questions because like I just don't feel we know enough about this. People can tell me this is the right opinion or that is the right opinion, but I really have to research it myself to know what the right thing is, and I just don't have time to research every issue. So I would rather not talk about those kind of things. Foreign policy, history, I'll talk about that shit. No problem. I feel I've earned that right over a certain amount of time, and I don't have problems asking questions about things like about like whatever. But yeah, when it comes to like making very, why not learn the basics? Learning the basics is difficult. I mean, what are the basics? Who do you rely on? I've read things. I was when I was in the UK last. Uh, I was there for back at my family's house. I was following the NHS advice as much as I could, and it changed over time. It's like you can't do all your own research. So like I mean, I've done biology 101. Like I know basic biology, but there's like this is statistical data. This is stuff which I would not be feel comfortable being able to even interpret properly. And so I don't want to, I don't talk about it, right? You know, uh, that's all I can, that's all I can say on that thing. And I think a lot of people are asking people for hot takes on stuff, or people are giving hot takes. I think there's a lot of hot take machinery out there that I think people should be a little bit more humble in what they know. It's like I'm not going to wade into, for example, the question of trans healthcare. For example, like what's an appropriate healthcare, what's not an appropriate healthcare, because I am eminently unqualified to say what is the correct healthcare to be given to trans people. In a political terms, though, I can say this. I think you know the current political moment, we're seeing a reactionary push against trans people, which is spreading over to all, you know, uh, LGBTQ community people. That's what I'm concerned about. When it comes to the healthcare issue, I don't know. People, it's gonna take time for medicine to work things out. Medicine has there are like medical protocols that seem to be accepted by the scientific community. Maybe this will change over time. Maybe it won't change over time. Uh, Medicine is something that evolves over time as new treatments and stuff like that come along. Uh, so I'm not going to wade in like certain people have and make like very strong statements about healthcare issues, which is like something I can't talk about. And I think it's irresponsible for left-wing commentators to be making taking really strong positions on an issue uh, like trans healthcare, uh, based on vibes and a couple of articles you read that seem plausible. Because this seems to me to be a very complicated medical issue, and it's between people and their doctors, right? And that's all I have to say about that. I just think I think a lot of people are freaking irresponsible and should know better. But of course, they don't know better because online media is a hot take machine. And frankly speaking, I get kind of fed up with. I get, I mean, like, I don't watch a lot of left media anymore because I just feel that people are yelling at me and they don't really know what they're talking about. They don't, they've only done a cursory view of some secondary or tertiary sources, and I just don't think that's politically helpful. So wait, a teacher was fired today in Wisconsin for publicly criticizing a decision to ban Rainbow Land. Huh. Yeah, exactly. That's the kind of thing I'm more interested in. Specifically, about how these issues are being used to like smash people's liberties. And I think that's a big problem. I don't know what you do about it. What about Sam and Hassan Piker? Tell me what about Sam and Hassan Piker? Like Sam Cedar and Hassan Piker? Well, Sam Cedar, I from listen to the interviews that they do sometimes. I generally don't really hit up the fun half that much. So I don't know what's going on exactly in the Majority Report fun half discussions, but I watch the interviews. Hassan Piker, honestly, I know who Hassan Piker is. My first Jacobin article actually criticized something Hassan Piker wrote, but I don't know. I don't really watch streams. I can't even really get. I don't really know how Twitch works that well. Everything seems really complicated, and it's always adverts and stuff. So I just don't really bother with that stuff. Sam Hyde and Hassan Piker? Who's Sam Hyde? I don't know who that is. Sam Hyde is one of the good Gen Xers. I mean, I don't. You like Sam? I've met Sam. He's a decent fella. I don't think he like people call him a grifter. He believes what he believes, right? He's a left liberal who wants to push the Democratic Party to the left. He's not lying to you about what he wants. He just has politics. A lot of people think that people are lying about their political positions, and there are people who seem to be definitely grifting and drama hunting. But like Sam Cedar is like a left liberal who has left liberal politics. Like, why are people mad at that? It's not like he's pretending to be anything else. What I do find more annoying is generally people who, who like the biggest problem in left media is this kind of endless endless podcast drama. Now, Jason will tell you the same thing. A very much bigger podcaster than us was talking to Jason, and this very much bigger major left podcaster said, why don't you do drama stuff? Why don't you go after all the people that you think are talking crap? And we, if all I can say, I hope Facebook never gives up our TIR chat to anything, right? But like, what's the point on reporting on what some other podcaster has said? Because like, I don't really know why that's relevant to anything. I mean, I'm not even that interested in going after like doing these videos, which I know they do on a lot of these shows, like, look how dumb this right winger is. If you're watching left media, I think, there's a place for it, but I think a lot of people watching left media already know that. So what's the point of showing an Alex Jones video or like some Republican senator saying some, it's stuff, it's fun, right? But that's not really politics. That's just like drama about people who, it's like third removed from politics. It's not even talking about the politics. It's like second removed. But yeah, of course, because we don't do podcast drama, and we could We could set Pascal on his enemies, or Jason on his enemies, or me on my enemies. I could start beef with a whole bunch of people. Kuba could start beef with a whole bunch of people. But what would that be? That would be nothing. I mean, like, we try to do fun interviews here. We try to like it is entertainment, but it's we try to do something that is valuable, right? And the best you can do is like maybe talk about some politics. But of course, like, that's not what sells. People say they want their vegetables. They say they want to learn about history. They say they want to learn about politics. They say they want deep dives, but they don't, right? Because the algorithm doesn't lie. And I don't think our product, as it were, is worse than other, comparably sized channels. But I can tell you, people like that freaking gossip. Exactly, said. People like the gossip. And, you know, it would be an easy way to get out, but it's not something Jason's interested in. Our videos, you know, yeah, it lies a little bit. What lies a little bit? People gossip. YouTube algorithm uses. Yeah. So it's, and sometimes we really do want to go after people, right? Like this guy who said some real dumb shit or had some dumb stuff on their show, but we don't go after them. We just, and you don't know it, but we see something stupid and then we try and do a show with somebody who knows about a topic and talk to them about it. I can't expect to. No, we're not diving into any of this Anna Kasparian drama. Yeah, like I don't have anything to say on that. And also, I think it's a little bit like, Pascal's in his 50s. What's his name? Jason's in his mid 40s. Me and Kuba are in our early 40s. We're too old for this, like, schoolyard jibber jabber that people that people are promoting. But yeah, we watch it. We see channels that just do 24 hours drama commenting on other podcast shows do much better than us, and it's frustrating. But it is what it is, because that's what people want. But we try to keep to what Jason's vision for the show was, which was which was like not going with the drama, like avoiding the drama. And people say, who cares about that fucking crap? Well, yeah, you say that, but like, people do care about that kind of stuff. And yeah, people love a bit of drama, but I kind of think it's maybe one day we'll do a drama show where we just get it all out. But like, we don't want to have beef with other podcasters, right? We don't want to, like, even if we think they're bad or problematic, it's just not something worth doing. Because, like, maybe we want to work with those people in the future for whatever reason. Like, it's a small field. Like, I don't see the point of going after a podcaster. Yeah, maybe in the champagne room. I mean, like, people know generally, like, what each one of us on TIR, our political orientations are, I guess. And we all have different orientations, and we all have different ideas about things. And we're not here to do like a freaking circle jerk about like this, that, and the other. We'll have people I disagree with on. We'll have people that Pascal disagrees with on, that Jason disagrees with on, that Kuba disagrees with on. And we'll just keep it all stowed and try and be polite and trying to find out like the best things from from each side. And I think there's even people I disagree with strongly on a lot of issues, I still think they can often have insights that are valuable. Like, I keep abreast of the conservative press because sometimes the things that they're saying is correct, even if they're saying them for a partisan or a bad reason or for some ulterior motive. If it's true, it's true. So it's like I think so much of left media has degenerated from an attempt at learning to a kind of self-referential, this person said that person said this, and this person is grifting to the right, this person's going to grift, this person's a grifter, it's like everybody you disagree with is not a grifter, right? People call us grifters. It's like, what the fuck are we grifting? Like, uh, you know, we barely make enough money to keep this show on the road as it is. And this is, we're not making Chapo money or Majority Report money or Brianna money or anything like that. And me and Kuba do this entirely because we like working with Jason and Pascal, right? That's why we do it. I enjoy working with my friends on a project. But yeah, like, that's it. Cliquishness. Like, I mean, people are asking, are we on the side of the revolutionary blackout or TYT or the vanguard? It's like, what is this? What does it mean to be on the side or in the clique of a particular, a particular group on the left? It becomes itself a mediation. It becomes a way to avoid doing politics while pretending you're doing politics. Like, people get so irate. Like, I'll make a comment on the Anna Kasparian stuff, but not really a comment about anything she said or anything like that. But rather, what I find quite interesting is, like, people are really upset about what she said and saying that she did this and she's doing that, and then people defending it. It's like, you know what? Nobody really bloody cares. Like, if I go out into Springfield right now and ask anybody, who's Anna Kasparian? You know what they're going to tell? I have no idea, right? It's not going to change anyone's opinion. It's just like the people who already know them know them. It's people who are plugged into this ecosystem. Nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows who Jason Miles is. My brother, the wrestler, probably is far more well known than I am. Around the world. Like, nobody knows that stuff. Even the big ones, nobody knows. Nobody really knows who Brianna Joy Gray is or the Majority Report is. Like, so, it is what it is. So, beyond people who are really plugged into this kind of media ecosystem, they don't give a shit. They just don't care. They, like, it's like, why do I care what this random person says? Like, TYT hasn't changed. It's exactly the same as it was in 2015. Maybe the issue is that your politics moved on and they didn't, right? Maybe their politics was very much like this 2015 moment. And they are in the same place as they always were. And, people are mad at them now. Well, that's because people have changed their politics, right? I'll tell you this. I appreciate about Majority Report over other left podcasts, which maybe this makes me a shill or whatever. It's because they actually do interviews with people, right? And they do, like, interviews with historians and stuff like that. And, honestly, when I watch TYT, when I ever see a clip, all I see is just, like, people shouting, right? And I'm like, I don't want to see people. I don't want to watch what's the guy who married Crystal Ball? Like his thing, they used to shout all the time, and it's like, I don't want to be shouted. And I get the feeling like, people used to complain about Fox News back in the 2000s and saying it's bad, it's like giving people bad ideas, it's making people angry. But what was the response? The response was just to replicate the same thing, right? but just with different politics, like shouting at people and condemning your political opponents. And I get that can be cathartic, that it feels like someone is like, yeah, finally somebody gets it. But I just don't see that much of a value to it. So, you know, uh, yeah, like the yelling, the constant look at this stupid person, look at this stupid person. I find that like very like, I mean, I find that very off-putting. I'm not saying these people are bad. I'm not even saying they're grifting. I'm just saying there's a model of media that I'm like not really uh, into, and that's and I don't think, and I see why, especially younger people are into it, because it's like exciting. It feels dynamic. It feels like passionate, and it's an effective method of communication for sure. Uh, but it's like eating burgers all day. Like maybe once in a while, a burger is a good idea, but maybe if you eat burgers every day, that's probably not great for your health. Have you considered a right winger said right wing things? Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. Have you considered that right wingers are saying right wing things? I don't. I mean, I suppose there is a value to like debunking right wing stuff and critiquing right wingers in terms of trying to win people over from the right. Uh, I'd certainly I can see there's a value in it somewhere, but I just feel like we've got to a point where that's all anybody bloody does. And like honestly, like people go like Jimmy Dore is a grifter. Like I don't think he's a grifter. I think he's just like that's him, right? He's like angry, and people are attracted to the angry, right? People are attracted to somebody who is good at communications, and you know, if you consume a lot of this media, you get to feel superior to people just watching TMZ. But is it really all TMZ? Isn't it just all TMZ? Like, why do you care? How hard is it to build a new political party? It's probably very hard. That's a good question. Is that a fire alarm? No, I don't know what it is. It's something. I'm at the university, and so like I don't know what's going on in the background. But yeah, I just wish people should watch Vaughn's show more. But Vaughn gives you vegetables, and people don't want vegetables, right? People want TMZ, and like I think you do have to be entertaining, and I think Jason is especially entertaining, but it's got to be in service of something that is more than just fighting with other podcasters or you know doing this kind of stuff. But yeah, so I would definitely say people support Ron more. But if you do these type of podcasts, right? Uh, the real way to get big is just start fights with people. Just look how it works. Just look at where people are going. Like, I mean, who's the biggest leftist YouTuber? Like, it's the Fausch guy, right? What is the Fausch guy's thing except two people sitting by a computer with Wikipedia open, and you know, I don't know. Like, is there maybe there's a value to that? Maybe someone could explain to me, but I don't. I've watched this. I've watched this, and I'm like, what's going on here? People are just like, you know, I don't know. I don't know. I'm very jaded on. I don't. Yeah, like people who Peter Zahan. Who is Peter Zahan? Like everybody's talking about him. I don't know who Peter Zahan is. Like I need to. It's like I mean and Ben knows this. This is not anything secret. Like I'm like Ben. I get a little bit of debate, but like I just like this debate culture. I just find not very enlightening. I suppose it's good when you have two people who really know what they're talking about, but so often online debates, are just two people who have decided to appoint themselves as the avatars of left and right, going at each other with terrible opinions and weak analysis. And I don't know. I don't know what that. I don't know what that looks like. And so I don't know what. I don't know what to do. I'm very tired of left media. I mean, I always tell this to Jason. I'm like, sometimes I just want to freaking tap out. The only thing that keeps me going is because we have a nice community of core watchers. And we also have, like, I like working with my friends, but like the broader field, it's very demoralizing. I mean, like after 2020, it's really been a shitty time, right? It is a shitty, shitty time for politics. Everybody is turning in on each other. People are turning to all kinds of nonsense. And I'm just like, maybe I should just sack it off and, instead of doing TIR, I'll run a D&D game instead. But, we appreciate our audience, and you help us keep us going. Like I said, we don't make it's amazing how much would you ever give an online class that we can start? I give online classes all the time, actually. Like I'm giving an online class right now on the late Imperial Middle East. So yeah, you can always you can always sign up for online classes. Vaughn, very, very, very good veggies. Yeah, Vaughn is very good veggies. Oh, you see Doug and Ashley. Oh, you speak up like friends. When are you going to do more gaming materialists? Good question. The reason we haven't done gaming materials for a while is there was some personal issues that me and Vaughn had, so like we didn't really have time to do it, and it's hard to recall with it's hard to record with Discourse because she's at a as like in a different time zone from us, and I haven't really been really into games for the last couple of months, largely because I had some improvements done on my house. I had to put all my game stuff away, and I haven't really gotten out again. I haven't been following. I'm out of D&D because like D&D sucks. But maybe we'll restart it again when we all have a little bit more time, and we can play some online D&D games. All those jackass podcasts and YouTubers just cook up drama and attack each other on the left are the epitome of bread and circus under capitalism. That's true. It is really the reincorporation of anti-capitalism. I'm not playing Diablo, by the way. To return to the question, it does feel a lot like bread and circuses. I feel, I feel like I like a bit of comedy with my podcast. If I'm going to listen to a podcast, I like people who are entertaining, but I don't just want entertainment. It's like having a sandwich with with nothing inside it. It's like you're just eating bread. It's just carbs. Do I play Diablo? No, Diablo. I'm against Diablo. I don't like those the things that turns you into like a rat where you're just chasing loot. Don't do the loot games. Even when I play a loot game, I don't get all the loot. I'm like, nope, I'm not getting the loot. I'm not picking everything up in Skyrim. I'm not going to sit around and do, slowly waddle back to sell everything at the vendors now. So loot. I'm a South Asian, by the way, and I support black liberation. White online left is very simple. It's not just a white left and it's not just white left or black left. I think it's just it's like a general left, like a lot of the opinions that people condemn as being white left opinions, they are just like opinions held by leftists all over the place, right? I was in Turkey, I've been in Iraq. I've heard like similar opinions coming around. And with this online stuff, people's views are becoming more homogeneous. This is why I find like the people who go on about Western leftists all the time. It's like people who go on about Western leftists, I swear to God, they've never been out of the United States, because like you'll find all the same bloody politics everywhere you go. Everybody, it's like people, I don't know, Vijay Prasad will condemn Western leftists. It's like, well, how are the Indian left doing, buddy? Like there's like a fascist Hindu nationalist who's allowing pogroms in the country Don't fucking get on your high horse about like Kerala to me, right? Which just doing some social democracy. I mean, it's all good, but none of us are on the bloody, nobody knows what's the path forward. The best way not to get stupid rich immediately in Elder Scrolls games is not to be a pack rat and act like a person. That's true. That's how you not get rich in it. Yeah, like all over the bloody world. Like, let's put aside the formerly socialist states around the world, but everywhere else, the left is in total bloody disarray. Like, I had someone telling me, like, actually, the Filipino, like, Maoists have the right answer. It's like, Jesus Christ, these guys have been hanging out in the middle of the jungle for freaking 50 years, right? For 50 bloody years. Like, it's not working, guys, right? Your Maoist People's War failed. You got cucked by people power when they overthrew Marcos. And now look who's in charge again. Where is Jean reading these comments? I'm not seeing him in the comments. You see, this is the chat. I'm reading the chat alongside. I'll give this to Vijay. He does call out Western Idpol. Yeah, he does call out Western Idpol. He's also, he's a funny old bird because he's like associated with a Marxist-Leninist party, but he's totally comes out of a trot tradition. Don't forget critical support for yeah, exactly. Womp. A lot of people act like they fucking know the answer, right? And if they knew the answer, we'd be doing a lot better than we are because we're not making any bloody progress as a left. And that's not just in the West, it's globally, right? Now, you want to talk to me about China? Like, China is doing fine for China, right? Like, they lifted a lot of people out of poverty. There may be problems there, but, they did a lot of stuff in that country, but they ain't exporting that. They're not going around the world like to export revolution. They're trying to make money, right? Do I like Paradox games? I've been playing Paradox games since Europa Universalis 1, so I know all about it. You very rarely see Vijay Prashad talk about caste. Yeah, well, it's interesting. This will, Vietnam. Now, Cuba is a big Vietnam booster. So, I hear Vietnam's doing fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Yeah, China isn't the USSR. It's not the USSR. Like, whatever you think, whether you think the government is socialist or not, the dominant mode of production in China is capitalism. And that's just fact. Like, they're linked to the global market. Like, if anybody's acting the most responsible capitalist state in the world, is China. Because they're trying to keep everything chill, They're trying to make money. They're trying to like get business deals. They're offering good deals to people around the world, and that's it, right? And like, I think these countries, they've done like a lot of good things, and maybe they've done some not so good things. But people wanted like a simple narrative of good guys and bad guys, and it's just not like that. And if you say that, it's like, like there's a tendency of some elements of the left to complain about like, purity fetish, because you're trying to analyze something, look at something critically, and if you're not 100% on board, you're like a pro-imperialist, and you're like you're lying, or you're nothing's good enough for you, right? I mean, how did Marxism go from a ruthless criticism of everything that exists to don't criticize anybody who says they're a socialist because that makes you an imperialist? It's kind of pathetic. But that's the level of discourse. We live in the world of Lusardo. He won. We live in this absolutely, like, if you're in the West, you live in the gilded cage. And if you live in the, like, developing world, you probably live in just a regular ass, horrible, filthy cage. And it's not great. And you see people suffering, and it sucks. And content is king. Content is king. I mean, what would good content look like? I don't know, guys. I don't think we are, we at TIR, we don't think we always get it right. We don't always do the best job, or we don't always do perfect shows, but we try. So we feel kind of, it's kind of frustrating for everybody here, like when drama channels do better than us. But it is what it is. Could we get some future shows on Yugoslavia? Yeah, that might be possible. I'd have to find someone good to talk about it. But like again, like one thing that really annoyed me the other day, we had a guy, we had Bill come on to talk about China. Even before he said a word, people were in the chat complaining that we were doing imperialist propaganda. It's like, oh my God, for crying out loud. Like, just at least watch the interview and give you the comments. I had it before. I wrote that Compact article. It was behind a paywall. People were like, oh, you're a coward writing behind a paywall. It's like, did I choose that it would be behind a paywall? No, right? And people were like calling me an imperialist after reading the first paragraph of the thing without reading the whole thing. It's like, come on, at least it's not even that long. Jason teasing Pascal is always good content. Yeah, Jason teasing Pascal is good content. The Twitter files. Yay, Twitter files. Catron has a millennial left fetish. Yeah, probably. He has some critiques. I was not invited to Crystal and Kyle's wedding. That's true. That was a great sadness for me. There were tears in my eyes. Pascal is amazing. He is amazing. People want free work. Speaking as an artist, yeah, people want free work. Like the sound drops. MT, amazing questions. There we go. You see, well, MT puts in a lot of work. Jason's a trooper. Yeah. The kitchen is getting remodeled. Tough stuff. My kitchen was remodeled. It was awful. I had to live on like microwaved beans for a day. Were any of the TIA and crew invited? No, we don't have any. Like, we've had very little contact with Kyle and Crystal. I know Pascal went on their podcast once, and I think he was told that they watch our show from time to time. So that's a cool thing. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, like, people went nuts about that wedding. Like, people were accusing Ben Burgess of like doing access journalism because Marianne Williamson was there. It's like, what are you talking about, right? It's like Ben literally sent me a picture. It's like, hey, look who this is. I was like, oh wow, Marianne Williamson. Well, and actually, I thought it was Chelsea Clinton at first, and I was like, oh no, it's Marianne Williamson. We don't know those people. You don't know those people. We like, what the fuck? Ben, I think even Ben was surprised he was invited to that wedding, but he was invited. You get invited to a wedding, they have an open bar, you go, right? And yeah, like there was a whole load of people on Twitter going on like absolutely insane stuff. I mean, like, there are people out there, like somebody was messaging Vaughn the other day claiming that I was taking money from Viktor Orban. I was like, whoa, where did that one come from? That is like, it's like, what? Viktor Orban is giving me money? I better check my mailbox because, like, I got bills to pay. I got kids. Don't let dumbass saying you're imperialist. I mean, like, I don't care about, like, yeah, I don't get upset about dumbasses, to be honest, saying I'm imperialist. I think they're kind of just stupid. But, it is what people call me a trot all the time, which is like, it's like, I'm not a trot. Like, I'm a trot taking money from Viktor Orban. There you go. How about that? That would be cool. It's like, you're a trot. It's like, I mean, like, the Magyar tentacles stretched far. Exactly. Victor. I actually know somebody who went to a funeral that was attended by Viktor Orban. I do have some right-wing friends, but they don't pay me any money. I like hearing VJ is in China. I like hearing VJ. I mean, I don't know if he's in Chinese pay. Trotsky was an agent of Hitler. That's true. Why would Trotsky do this? No, people just get mad because I'm like not on the Stalin train. It's like, bros, I'm just not on the Stalin train. Like, sorry guys, I think he was like a bad ruler. I don't think everything that went wrong in the Soviet Union was like, oh, it's all Stalin, but like, I don't think he helped that much. But that makes me an imperialist, so whatever. It's like, Yeah, like, but that makes you a trot. Like, so yeah, I'm not like, like, my day job is I'm a historian. And so, like, I try to, like, be honest with the historical record. Uh, but I think a lot of people just come to read history so that they can uh, confirm what they already believe, right? Any professional goals in the next few years? Not really. I mean, uh, my job is pretty good. I like my boss, and I teach classes, and I do my graduate program, and I have my radio show here, and just going to keep on trucking. Hopefully, get my book finished at some point on late Ottoman Kurdish politics. It's a book that no one will read, but it will hopefully get me tenure. Sorry, not tenure. Get me promoted to full professor, and then I'll get more pay. So I got to get that together. So something I've been meaning to do for a while. Stalin quit helping. God damn it! Yeah, it's like also like I just see these kids. I see these kids online just going on about like Stalin this, Stalin that. And I'm like, oh my god! Like, are we still there? Like, just are we still doing this? Are we still debating this thing? The book will sell 1,000 copies. That's optimistic. Someone will steal my book and translate it into Kurdish and Turkish, and then that might sell 1,000 copies. Yeah, Gene. I think a lot of people on the left have what? Have Gamergate? Is it Gamergate brain? Gamergate brain. I think so. Coming to LibGen mirror near you. I know, man. Like LibGen. Like academia is actually like a pretty exploitative system, really, because there are huge companies making money of academic articles that you have to write for free. But you can't. I would be less angry at the academic publishing industry if like academic articles were freely available to everybody. But it's like they charge so much money for them as well. It's such a scandal. So like, I don't mind writing for free, but it's when you write for free and then people can't access your articles, uh, and then these companies are making money off you. It feels like a mugs game, and yeah, I just don't think that's a very like I feel very uncomfortable, to be honest, with a lot of. Uh, I feel very uncomfortable with a lot of the practices in academia, and especially with the way that you know research is basically hidden away from people. This really pisses me off in my professional career as a government bureaucrat. What pisses you off? Everybody thinks Twitter has. I think everybody on Twitter has Gamergate. I can't really remember Gamergate. Was it about ethics in journalism? I can't remember. I just remember there was a period where people really hated Anita Sarkeesian, I believe her name was. And it was like, yeah, her videos are kind of trash, but like, it's not like that. Why does it matter? It's just like stupid. Yeah, I mean, Stalin is overblown. Far more people do. I mean, that's the point is not to like say one is better than the other. I mean, like colonialism is pretty freaking bad. Like its global cost is pretty heavy. Yeah. Not having access to academic articles because of paywalls and not having JSTOR account. Yeah, exactly. It's like it's really problematic. Yeah. Ethics in journalism was the cover. Game and Cable was a hate on women. That's what it was all about. It's like, bro, I don't like. I watched an Anita Sarkeesian video, and I was like, this is kind of a really shitty video, and it's stupid. But like, I was like, but why are people having a nervous breakdown about it? Like, people were like, it was like she'd committed a war crime on someone. It's like, oh my god, who cares? Like, about her silly discourse on, I don't know, what was it? It was like strippers in GTA or something. I can't remember. It was so long ago. I'm just like, oh my God, why people care about this? This is like a lot of my attitude to some of this drama is like, it's like my attitude to the Anna Kasparian drama is like, why do you care about this that much? It's just don't watch it if you don't like it, you know. Angela Nagel. Oh well, she was cancelled, wasn't she? I can't. She was cancelled for writing something anti-immigration. You know what I would say about that whole thing about her anti-immigration thing that got Angela Nagel cancelled? I think like she was actually kind of pointing out something that's like real that a lot of let's say like the radical liberal, the current affairs crew don't like to talk about. It's like, well, your social democratic project in the United States will require border controls. You can pretend that it won't require border controls, but it will require border controls. And you ignoring that reality is not addressing it, right? So Angela Nagel at least was kind of honest about it. But is Nagel a right winger now? I don't think so. I don't even know. What is a right winger anyway? Everybody's demanded DeSantis style. No, yeah, like is that what she's demanding now? I don't know. Like I don't know what she's demanding now. I have no idea. I have not followed her for a long time. Parliamentarian got less play as drama. Kill All Normies is pretty good. Yeah. It's a pretty good book. She wants E-Verify. Oh, E-Verify. Yeah, but like I get why a social democrat might want E-Verify. Like I had a student who went off to work for Department of what is it? See, the Department of I think it was Homeland Security. He was working in the immigration office, and doesn't work there anymore. But he said, yeah, like the best way to stop illegal immigration is like unionization and E-Verify, because it's the business people who are hiring these people. So you need to go after them with E-Verify and unions. And that's what she was. Yeah, E-Verify. Yeah, I don't agree necessarily with that. I'm just saying it's an attempt to try and square a circle that people don't want to face. That your social democratic project at home also requires the exclusion of undocumented workers from the economy. And that's why the lefties, the hardcore lefties, like social democracy, social fascism. There you go. How about that? It's used against unions all the time. I mean, I don't know. Is it used against unions all the time? I mean, it may be. Like, I'll take your word for it. I mean, my point isn't to defend or not defend Angela Nagel's position. My point was that she was trying to take on a question that people like are always trying to avoid. And I think, people freaked out. I mean, like people want to avoid the question of like, yeah, we get all our social democratic stuff, and what's going to happen if you live in a world where there is like part of the world that's wealthy and part of the world that is suffering. People are going to try and get out of that suffering part. Not everybody, but a lot of people are going to try and get out of that suffering part, and it is what it is. I don't know what the solution is because I don't know any solution. And what pisses me off, there's a lot of fucking YouTubers out there who are acting like they know what the solution is. And maybe we should not be trying to give solutions. Maybe that's not our job. I mean, I watch people and I'm like, do you hear yourself? I mean, come on. Tips for swaying lumpens to the left would be nice. Tips for swaying lumpens. I mean, like, from Gamergate, we got incels, Elon Musk devotees, and QAnon. Yeah, that sounds about right to me. Being confident sells. Being confident does sell. You should read that article. Yeah, it's been like, when was that article? 2018? I haven't read it for ages. I remember reading it and thinking, this doesn't sound right to me. But her issue was she was trying to give a solution. Exactly. I mean, I tend to try and give people, I mean, my personal opinion is I try and, until people have really proven themselves to be full of crap and to be utterly cynical, I try and just take them that they're telling me something in good faith. And maybe that leads to me being, being like giving someone who doesn't deserve it the better benefit of the doubt. But I'd rather do that than just be a freaking asshole on people and just go full nuclear on them. And like, I really hate this attitude where it's like, it's not my job to freaking educate you. It's like, well, if I'm wrong, tell me why I'm wrong. It's not my job to educate you. Then why are you telling them I'm wrong? Why do you even care what I think then? You know, Nagel was just advocating Clinton's border policy after and after. Fair enough. Like, I just don't remember what Nagel said, to be honest. I just remember she said some shit about immigration. And yeah. But perfectly within the tradition of social democracy. Hate to say it, but that's the truth. It's crazy that people call what I'm saying hated. No, I don't think you're hating on Nagel. Like, I think people should critique Nagel's arguments. I think that's fine. But I think a lot of critiques end up going like meta or personal. And even if there are people where you think there's like some other forces in play, I think it's just best to take their argument at face value and then critique it, right? And rather than like going, well, that you're saying that because you're a Western imperialist shill, but it's like, well, your argument is a problem because of this, this, and this. I don't. I know you don't. Okay. I'm not saying. Cool. Yeah, I think people should like. I think like people just get really fucking angry, and I don't blame them. Like, I don't blame like trans people for being super angry about like people who seem to be like giving aid and succor to the transphobes. Like, yeah, I would be pretty worried about it. Like if I felt that my life was in danger or my healthcare was in danger, I get that. I get the visceral emotional response. But I had to learn to, when I lived in Turkey, I had to learn to not get angry about the massive anti-Kurdish racism I used to hear on a daily basis. And I used to have to just like, it's not going to help me just getting mad at everybody because I'll be fucking mad all the time. And so like, I'm pretty placid about that kind of stuff. You feel me, people? Do you feel me, chat? It's like, people just want to freaking find a bad guy and they want to get it all out on them, get all that rage out on them. It doesn't help anything. It is what it is. Best to clear show holes or contradictions in an argument before jump. Yeah, exactly. What's my problem with Doug's recent article? Well, take it up with Doug. Like, I just wanted to give Doug the opportunity to like steel man his argument and do you think Turkish Kurds acting on? Yeah, I do see Turkish Kurds acting online. I actually see diaspora Kurds acting online, and they fucking annoy the shit out of me with the like victim stuff. It's like some guy got mad at me for saying, some guy got mad at me because there was an article which said Kurds were genocided during the First World War, blah, 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 blah. I was like, my bro, that didn't happen. And people were saying all kinds of, you don't know this. I was like, this is literally what I wrote my PhD thesis on, was this period up to the end of the First World War. Well, up to the beginning of the First World War, but the book's going to head to the end of the First World War. I was like, I know this, like the Russians weren't trying to replace every Kurd with a Cossack. That's not what was happening. There were deportations from the Turks. That's true. But those were mainly refugees who were fleeing an area, who were deported to places so that they could be assimilated. That's a bit different from what happened to the Armenians, which was where they were officially deported and murdered on the way, right? So, yeah. And people got mad about that. and they were like, "Oh, you're not this, you're not that," or like, yeah, it's like I'm not into that. I'm not into that. Like, not into any of that stuff. I mean, like, I'm not even into like people always, a lot of Turkish people like you're pro PKK. I was like, I think the PKK has a lot of fucking problems, but they are there. They are what they are, right? They have like a base of support. It's like you could try and sideline them by finding a moderate force like the HDP, but that didn't work. You didn't want to do that. So, they're there. And like you've been fighting them since 1984. Doesn't seem to be like, doesn't seem to be resolving the issue. So like, I don't know what you want from me. Like, angry at me for what? The Armenian genocide was tragedy. I mean, it was a tragedy, but it was like something people did. I mean, it's pretty conclusive about what was going on with that genocide. It might be a way to manage alienation. Yep, I think a lot of it is a way to manage alienation. I think these communities, uh, are, I think they're helpful for people. And I think there is a value to having a community. It is very isolating, feeling that your opinions are like only your own, or are you crazy? I remember a friend of mine in Turkey told me, his dad told me this. He said he was like in Diyarbakir, which is in the Kurdish area of Turkey, in the 70s, and he was a very religious guy. And then he just started having doubts about religion, but he lived in a religious community where everybody believed. And he was like, am I going crazy? He couldn't sleep. He was depressed. And he went into a bookshop once and found a copy of Sartre, I think. And he said it was the best thing that ever happened to him, because it's like, oh, somebody else thinks this, so I'm not going crazy. So I think there's value to that. But I think the risk of these communities is that sometimes these become surrogates for being actually involved in politics. And I would hate to think that people were like, and I don't think people are. I would hate to think that people were, using an internet community as a replacement, as opposed to, an augmentation to their communities. And people talk a lot of shit online. I think it was Mike Tyson who said that the internet has made a lot of people confident that they ain't going to get punched in the face, or something to that effect. Because we have to stop Jason sometimes, like reading a comment and then asking the person, say, would you like me to come over? And you want to say that to my face. And it's like, whoa, be careful there, guys. I had a chat with a 6-year-old man the other night who discovered what alienation meant as he reflected back on his life. Yeah, people do reflect on that. Well, it's getting pretty late, guys. It is nearly 11 o'clock, and I will need to go home. I have some jobs to do early in the morning, and it has been a pleasure, TIR comrades. Hopefully, I will see you again, I guess on Saturday. I think that's when I'm next slated to appear. And everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. No, he said something about the internet. So, okay, guys, have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful evening. Wherever you are in the world, stay safe, stay happy, and we are out.